All right, let's go ahead and get back to our current guest that's on the line. Nathan Couch is our guest. His website is nathancouch.com. Again, Nathan, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us on Fringe Radio tonight.
That's great. I'm having a blast.
Let's switch gears a little bit. Before we switch gears, you did send me an email the other day, and I put some notes here about Krampus Night. I never heard about this. This is a new one. Why don't you give me tell me a little bit about this?
This is something that's just beginning to catch on here in the United States, but a lot of our shortwave listeners probably know what we're talking about if they're over in Europe. St. Nicholas, of course, last night was St. Nick's. That's, St. Nick is the actual, Catholic saint who eventually grew to become Santa Claus somehow. But he, in a lot of areas of Europe, he had an assistant. St. Nick would leave presents and stockings for good children, and in certain parts of the continent, he would have someone who would dole out punishment to the naughty children. And in the Alps, his partner was Krampus, a devil or demon that St. Nick had enslaved to do his bidding. And Krampus looks very much like a goat man. He's usually depicted as being covered in black fur and monstrous horns. He usually has a forked serpent-like tongue. And not only he didn't just leave a lump of coal in your stocking. Krampus would actually beat the naughty children with switches and then put them in a basket and carry them off to hell. So it was real high stakes whether you were naughty or nice in the Alps. I'm glad I didn't grow up. That would have been traumatizing. So tonight is Krampus night, and in a lot of areas in the Alps, men dress up like Krampus and roam the streets and terrorize children. It's almost like a Halloween environment.
Really?
Where you're just out to scare people. And this is starting to catch on here. And unfortunately, I can't think of the community, but there's a town in Indiana that has Krampus night. It's going on tonight. Somebody is near a computer. You go to Google, copy an Indiana Krampus night. Basically, you pay your money. You can decide to tell them you're good, and they'll give you a certain something to hold that signifies to the Krampuses you've been good. But if you pay and say you've been naughty, they give you this other totem, and then the Krampuses will chase you around the landscape like a haunted house. And then afterwards, all these Krampuses parade through downtown. It's something I need to experience before I die.
That's a new one on me. There is a website out there called Krampus.com, and has all kinds of interesting stuff out there. That's a new one on me, Nathan. I never heard of that before. There's so many things that surround the Christmas tradition. I just to digress a little bit, I grew up, my mom is kind of an old world, well, she's not kind of, she is an old world Italian woman. And, of course, we have, Saint Nick or, Santa Claus for Christmas. But in Italy, they have the good witch, a holiday witch called Befana. That's kind of like a Santa Claus, and she delivers gifts. And I've done a little bit of digging into some of these different traditions, folklore, what have you. It's amazing how many things kind of sprout out of Christmas.
Yeah, there's one part of Italy where there was, I don't know if it still exists, but there was at one point a belief that if you were born on Christmas, you had a very good chance of becoming a werewolf later in life. So people who had a birthday on Christmas Day were viewed pretty suspiciously at one point in Italian history. I don't know how current that belief is anymore.
Yeah, that's. Let me ask you this: have you done with your research? Have you dug into werewolves or vampires at all? I
have not. But of course, back in 2006, 2006, I mentioned this earlier, there was like a Bigfoot-like outbreak of sightings in Washington County back in 2006. It was covered briefly on CNN. And what happened was this thing that sort of looked like a bear, that sort of looked like a wolf, stole a dead deer out of the back of a county worker's truck. And he reported it to the police department because he thought it might be dangerous. The deputy was in front of the guy, unfortunately, and he wrote down it was a Yeti sighting. And so the media picked it up and ran with it as a Bigfoot sighting. But, of course, Linda Godfrey, we talked about earlier, she researched it and kind of connected it with this Wausau, Wisconsin cryptid called the bear wolf.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But,
Linda's the expert on dogmen and werewolves and things like that. But I did find a dog man-like sighting here in West Bend that happened 6 months prior to all of that back in 2006. These kids saw a cat run into a swampy area right in the middle of West Bend. There's a little creek-like area. West Bend's a pretty populated place. There's 40,000 people. And so it's a real city. And they saw this cat. They chased after it. They found it. It was dead, and it was being eaten by a canine-like creature with red glowing eyes that was hunched over on two legs. And this didn't scare them, but they went home and told their parents, and Mom scolded them for making up lies, and then that strange incident at Holy Hill happened 6 months later, and she started to believe that maybe her kids were being truthful.
Interesting. Kids tend to see so many different. That's the thing. There's so many odd. I don't want to. Well, maybe odd isn't the right word to use, Nathan. But there's so many different things out there, and it's kind of like with ghosts and stuff. Always hear about the imaginary friends or saw the imaginary creatures. Maybe kids see some of this stuff, and maybe there is something more to it than their imagination.
This is true. Mom had a theory that, because a lot of these dog-like creatures are seen near areas that are sacred to Native Americans, and one of her oldest child was actually part Cherokee Indian, so she thought maybe that had something to do with why they encountered it. I have no idea if there's a connection.
All right, everybody, we're back with Nathan Couch. You were talking a little bit before the break, Nathan, about now this was somebody in your family that had was it Indian heritage or Native American heritage?
Oh well, this was actually the young lady whose children saw the werewolf-like creature.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Here in West Bend. Her son was partially Native American, and she theorized that maybe that's why they were able to see this creature, since a lot of these strange canines are seen near areas that are sacred to natives. I have no idea if that has anything to do with it, but that was what the mom was thinking.
Gotcha. Let's talk a little bit, if we can, change gears a little bit up about your ghost hunting and the Downtown West End Ghost Walks tour. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I got to know a group of paranormal investigators through volunteer work at the Washington County, Wisconsin Historical Society. They used to put on a haunted house, and I was one of the actors, and a lot of the people who donated a lot of the props and time for that event were in this paranormal group. And they had a bit of a breakup, and a certain segment of that group formed a new group called the Paranormal Investigation and Research Society. And they knew how much I was into, all things Fortean, so they contacted me, and I had at the time been thinking about writing a book. I hadn't wrote one at that point. I wanted to collect stories about hauntings and local folklore in my new home of Washington County, Wisconsin, and I thought joining that group would be a great excuse to finally get around to writing the book. So I joined the group, and I eventually did write that book. It's called Washington County Paranormal, a Wisconsin Legend Trip. So that's really how I got into it, and we're a group of paranormal investigators. We do the standard type of stuff, the DVRs and the EVP work and EMF detectors, all that.
Gotcha. So your group goes out and goes through a lot of the haunted stuff out that way.
Yeah, we investigated several of the places in my book, places that allowed us to investigate. Obviously, there's some places in the book that are just haunted stop signs. It's kind of hard to do a paranormal investigation at some intersection. So where there was actually
okay, what's
a building.
What's a haunted stop sign? That's a new one on me.
Well, the stop sign itself, actually, I didn't write about because it's just located out of the county, and I'm a stickler. But there's this haunted road here called J Road. There, people report haunted, apparitions of joggers that vanish or appear in the back of your car, that sort of thing. There's apparitions of cats. You're supposed to be able to see the apparition of a house on fire, and all that sort of thing. But there's also a stop sign several miles away from all of that. And you're supposed to be able to see blood on this stop sign. It bleeds. The story is that there was an accident. Someone was thrown through the window of their car and hit the stop sign. And so that's the story of the haunted stop sign. And it was pretty hard to investigate any of that stuff because this road doesn't have it. It's pretty much a swamp you're driving through, and there's really no shoulder. So the only way to really investigate that is drive down the road. So you don't need to be a paranormal investigator to do that one.
Gotcha. We got a bunch of questions sent in, and of course that was one of them. Bill from upstate New York writes in and says, Nathan, have you had any experience in your childhood that developed the interests in ghosts and monsters, etc.?
Yeah, my parents really traumatized me at an early age. They weren't what you'd call Forteans. They weren't into this whole esoteric sort of stuff, this UFOs or any of that. But they talked about these stories. They weren't skeptics, but they weren't believers. But they talked about this sort of thing all the time. It's really hard to explain. So we'd be sitting around the dinner table when I'm 5 or 6 or 7 years old, and they're talking about Indian curses and the thing that they read in the Weekly World News about the skunk ape and all these types of things, and it scared the daylights out of me. And at some point, I think I turned the corner, and it turned into fascination as a way for me just to deal with it. And that's pretty much how I got interested in unexplained phenomena.
Interesting, very interesting. Another question is, can you tell us about your favorite folklore story growing up in the Appalachian Mountains, and have you ever investigated any of these stories?
Well, the town I grew up in White County, Georgia, which in the little town of Cleveland, the home of the Cabbage Patch Doll. That's basically all the town is known for. And it was a dry county up until maybe 5 years ago. So you couldn't buy alcohol there except for one small community. And there was no movie theater or anything, so me and my friends constantly went out looking for ghosts. We would go to the locations where there was supposed to be a haunting or a curse or a Bigfoot sighting. So if you consider that investigating, then we did investigate. But my favorite story out there, there's a road. I'm completely blanking on the made-up name of the road, but there's a name that the locals attribute to it, but it's actually called Black Road. And supposedly there was a house out there that caught on fire, and there's the spirit of a woman who she burned up in the fire, but for whatever reason, she can shapeshift. Her ghost is usually seen in the form of a black panther. There's something along these lines, and that was a favorite place for me to go, for me and my friends to go. We'd drive down this road. You're supposed to be able to see green orbs of light coming out of this pond on the property and all of that. And there was one night we drove down it, and the sky was green. It's very hard. I don't understand it, but there was some cloud cover, but there was a green glow all around, up in the sky, and it was really, really creepy. We drove all the way down to the end of the road. We were really freaked out by this green glow in the sky that I'd never seen there before since. I mean, the entire sky had a green tint to it. It was very peculiar. Then as we're driving back, there's 2 carloads of us. My friend is up front, and we're driving through, and this black dog with these glowing eyes runs out and starts attacking my friend's pickup truck.
Really?
And yeah, and we initially thought it was like, oh, it's the ghost of it's the Black Panther ghost.
Right, right.
But then we noticed that every driveway on the street from that point on until we got to the end of the road had a black dog sitting in the driveway, just staring at us with its eyes, picking up the light from our headlights, so their eyes were glowing. And I'd never seen a dog on that road before or since. And every driveway had a black dog. And, of course, I'm sure your listeners are aware of all the various black dog stories, especially in the South, where black dogs are usually supernatural in some way.
Mm-hmm.
So that one, that's really my favorite from back home.
I'm kind of chuckling about the Cabbage Patch Cabbage Patch Kid. Yeah.
They still make them by hand there at Babyland General Hospital, and for an obscene amount of money, you can go in there and watch them be delivered. The nurse pulls the Cabbage Patch doll out of the actual head of cabbage, and you get to name it, and they give it a birth certificate. And for an obscene amount of money, it used to be $300 back in the 90s or maybe more,
right.
You can adopt this Cabbage Patch doll. But they are all handmade in America when you buy them from here. It's not the ones with the plastic heads made in China that you get at Walmart. So.
I remember when I first saw the Cabbage Patch, I shouldn't say this, but I mean, they could scare the heck out of some little kid. I mean, some of them are pretty scary looking. They look quite deformed.
I grew up with them, so it wasn't unusual to me, but my wife is a little creeped out by them a little bit. She's from Wisconsin, so she wasn't so familiar. And the Easter parades in my town, there was always a troop of giant pantomime Cabbage Patch dolls with actors under the costumes running down the street. I can only imagine people who didn't know what was going on getting terrified by that.
Yeah, dress up as one of those and go to a Packers game.
Yeah, I mean, they're like sports mascot Bernie Brewer type enormous pantomime Cabbage Patch dolls.
I've seen some people here in town that look like Cabbage Patch dolls. It's amazing.
I've seen a couple of people who do somewhat resemble those. Yeah. It's unusual.
Talk about alien grays or hybrids. Maybe some of these. Maybe there's more to these Cabbage Patch dolls than we realize.
I mean, dolls themselves are a creepy phenomenon. Period.
You're right, man. Dolls are creepy, and I get every now and then I'll get people that'll send me different photos. There's actually a paranormal researcher. I can't think of her name. I've been trying to make contact with her through Facebook, and she has a large collection. Of course, Annabelle, the Conjuring doll, of course, but she posts. Amy Jo is her name. If you do a search on Amy Jo Paranormal, you'll find her. And she works for she's with a big paranormal group in the Southeast, and she's got all pictures of these. I mean, these things scare the hell out of you, man, just looking at them. They're scary, dude. They're scary looking things. I'd be terrified if something like that came in the door.
There's a whole class of haunted dolls that you can purchase on eBay. I don't know why anybody would want to purchase a doll that's actually supposed to be haunted. Having any ghost in your home would be unnerving, but even if it's nice, but to have a creepy little Annabelle or a Robert the Doll living in your house.
Oh, man, scare the heck out of me.
Yeah.
You want to take a call?
Sure.
All right. Caller, good evening. Welcome to K-Talk. You're on with Nathan.
Hey, pal, how you doing?
Hey, Harv, what's going on?
Hey, man, you recognize me.
Oh, I always do.
Listen, I'd like to ask your guest a question. Something that hit me a while back, actually, and then this kind of brought to the forefront. For my whole life, all the way from ghost hunting to UFOs to, the whole 9 yards, there's always been this skepticism by the prominent media, should I say, and the making fun of this and then making fun of that and making you seem and look like a loony and stuff. Now, I've seen my share of things. Now, occasionally in the past, and I'll hurry to the question, I've doubted myself just because I thought, well, maybe they're right. And then I get to thinking about it. Gosh, that's mind control. And,
yeah.
I'd like to ask your guest, it makes you doubt yourself.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And, I'd like to ask you, say the, percentages on 100% to 0, all the people that you've ever interviewed or talked to that have seen this or done that, what's the percentage that you think that someone was lying or telling the truth? And for sure. You know, and maybe that's conjecture on your part, but so what? You're the pro. You got to do some of that.
Well, it's hard for me to put a percentage on it, but I have talked to some people where I did doubt their faculties. I would never write down what they said and say these people are crazy, but there are some people, they're not necessarily insane or mentally ill or anything, but there's some people where every single thing is some kind of paranormal or unexplainable experience, and they don't claim to be psychic or anything like that or sensitive, but it really makes you wonder if they will immediately jump to the conclusion that it must have been a ghost and not the sump pump in the basement.
Did they do it for attention or for recognition or? I don't think I've ever encountered anybody who is trying to get attention. I know there are some people out there, especially this day and age, where it is possible to make some money off some kind of experience, like if your house, you say in your house has a demon in it. But there are people who I think they're just so they want to have an experience so badly that I don't think some people don't look at things critically. Because I mean, if you can look at something that happened and you can explain it away in any way, I think you have to, just for the sake of not contaminating the body of evidence out there. Because I've had stuff happen to me that might have been paranormal, but then it could have been something wrong with the wiring. Well, does that something? Part of that self-doubt, does that have to do with the preconditioning of, doubt yourself because this stuff probably isn't real?
That could be part of it, but I think when you're talking about Freudian research, the stakes are just so high. I mean, because we're talking about researching energies and extra dimensions and things that will really turn science on their ears. So if it is something that can be explained away with our current understanding, I think the responsibility is to explain it away. But then if you're out in the woods and you see a half man, half goat, and you know it's not a deer, then what else could it be? That's something that's more difficult too.
Well, now, are you saying you saw something like that? Because I've never seen anything like that.
I have not seen it, but I've
had
people who have messaged me saying
I get the example. The reason I'm asking this thing is because I don't know the day that I became aware, and so I had already been preconditioned way before I knew what was going on.
Hey, I got to take a quick commercial break. You want to stay on hold, Harv, or what?
Sure, yeah, I'd like to follow it up a bit.
All right, hold on. All right, everybody, welcome back to Fringe Radio. Nathan Couch is our guest tonight, and Harv is on hold. Harvey, we were talking before the break about being conditioned to see these things.
Yeah, or conditioned not to. And I was thinking during the break how I was over talking Nathan. I'm sorry, pal. What were you saying?
I was just saying that for one point, the stakes are so high when you're talking about Freudian research that when we're talking about energies and dimensions and life forms that have not been discovered, and that if they are discovered, it really would really set science on its ears. So you have to be really, really cautious, I think, when you start.
The stakes are so high.
Saying that something's paranormal. You have to be really critical about it. But you shouldn't automatically assume anybody is isn't crazy or they're lying, but you shouldn't assume that they're not not crazy. They're not, you know.
Hey, a few years back, I was. Oh, sorry.
Oh, right ahead.
A few years back, I was doing something on a drywall job, and I forget what it was, and somebody said, "Hey, how'd you know that?" And I'm like, "Well, everybody knows that." And the guy I was working for said, "No, nobody knows that." And it got me thinking. Everybody knows things, but no one else might not know it, and they just take it
for granted.
For granted, exactly. So that you see things maybe every day, and you don't report it because you've seen it, you've been in it, you've done it your whole life. So it's nothing strange, really. And I was wondering, is there a form or a way to, without, I haven't thought it out well enough, and I doubt that I could. I understand the concept, but I can't really, do you understand what I'm saying?
Are you trying to talk about, you're saying that there isn't, like, a way for people to really report this stuff? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, nobody reports it because it's normal.
Well, there is a genuine fear that most people have if they experience something completely unexplainable, that if they come forward, some people might think that they're crazy or they're lying or something. So
that's like when you're scared, when you're someone scared. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, and then other people just, maybe they don't know who to turn to, or they didn't really understand it. I mean, earlier in the show, I talked about someone who heard me talking about goat men on a podcast, and they realized this thing that chased them through the woods once matched the description of what I was talking about. And so most of the people who contact me, they do it just to try to understand what they experienced.
You know, I used
my
to
name is not going to necessarily make fun of them right away, or you know, they're going to approach it with an open mind.
You know, I used to date this gal. She's a doctor of psychology. She was down in Machu Picchu, and she said that she went to a museum, and she said they had clothes there that were 12 feet high. And I'm like, really? Because it was my interest.
Right.
And that she said it, and that she saw the evidence, which I have been there. You know, it started making me think. Sure would be fun if we'd all just put our cards face up and let's sit this one out and see what happens. I'd like to know. I would. I'd like to know what a wonderful. This is a wonderful place. Take a breath of air, you get to live. Man, how cool is that? Wow. You're sitting in the ocean. Water everywhere, not a drop to drink.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an incredible place.
It is.
I mean, there's nothing that really drives me more crazy than when someone says they saw a giant, hairy, gorilla-like creature walk through the woods, and then a naturalist or someone says that they probably saw a bobcat or a cougar.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they give you this skeptic's explanation that is just, you know, mistaking a bobcat for a primate is
Nathan, where are you at?
Seeing a primate in Texas. They're both implausible. One, you know,
where are you at?
I'm in Wisconsin.
Oh, I've been to Wisconsin. Man, two seasons, cold and winter.
Yep, that's it. Yep.
But everybody's got their own bait shops there, and they got their prize fish up on. Oh, and food. Oh man. Tell people in Wisconsin know how to eat some
food.
food.
Shop called the Dam Bait Shop, which is my favorite DAM Bait Shop. It's my favorite bait shop name ever. So.
Where's that?
Beaver Dam has a bait shop called the Dam Bait Shop, DAM. It's my favorite name of any business on planet Earth.
Hey, Harv, I'm going to let you go. I got some more questions come in for him.
All right, brother. Take care of you. Thanks, Nathan.
Take care, man. Be good.
Thank you. Thanks for the question.
Take care.
Hmm.
He's true. It's true though. You know, people need to open their eyes and look around a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that somebody saying they saw Bigfoot or Goat Man is mind-boggling, but you shouldn't doubt them. I mean, when I first broke the story about that September 2014 weird creature sighting at Holy Hill, I did it on my paranormal tour website, and the people who follow this particular website, you know, they have a strong interest in ghosts, and some of these people were ridiculing this woman, saying she was insane because she saw this thing, and that drives me even crazier is when I see someone in the Fortean community who has someone who has like a belief in ghosts or Bigfoot, and then they'll yell at the UFO guy for being crazy, or they'll yell they'll yell at the Loch Ness Monster person for being crazy, and it's that sort of hypocrisy really hampers all things Fortean. I mean, you don't have to believe that someone saw Goat Man, but you shouldn't dismiss it as impossible simply for being impossible, because the whole Fortean school of thought was designed so that wouldn't happen.
Well, I think, you know, I think there's nothing wrong with being skeptical, not necessarily
Oh, no,
skeptic.
you have to be.
Yeah, I mean, because there are people out there that do things. I think there's people out there who do things for attention. They just want to capture some attention.
Well, Rick Dyer, we talked about Rick Dyer earlier. So.
Right. And maybe make a buck or two or a nickel or two along the way. That's what I think he was trying to do.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you have to look for a motive. Are they capitalizing in some way from their claim? The people who come to me, a lot of them don't even want their names printed. So these people are having experiences that they want to discuss, but they're afraid to discuss in public.
Right.
Whereas if you say you have Bigfoot in the back of your ice cream truck, you're driving around charging people $2 a pop, that's when you got to really be careful.
Exactly. We've got a little bit of time left. You've got a couple other books out, too. You want to talk about them?
Yes. Well, Washington County Paranormal Wisconsin Legend Trip is a collection of hauntings and various Fortean things that have taken place in the community where I live. The Downtown West Bend Ghost Walk is comprised of a lot of the stories in that book. It would be interesting, I think, to people even outside of this area, because there are detailed essays and history. And there's also driving directions, so should anybody in Salt Lake City or any of the other cities listening right now find themselves in Washington County, they can go pop down to the local Goatman Road and see if they can find the creature themselves. And then I have a short story featured in the WWA Press anthology, Wisconsin Harvest Volume 2, which is a collection of work by Wisconsin writers or by writers about Wisconsin. So it's a fictional piece, and that's an extremely hard-to-find book. There's only 350 copies printed, but they are for sale at jnathancouch.com. You'd have to buy that one directly from me. Otherwise, Goatman Flesh or Folklore, Washington County Paranormal, those can be gotten at any bookstore or at Amazon or Barnes & Noble,
Gotcha.
Places like that.
So they're available in several different places. Any other books? What's on the line for you, Nathan? What's next?
There are 3 books that I want to write, and I have no idea which one is coming up. I would really like to continue pursuing strange creatures like Goatman, the type of creatures from mythology, the ones you don't hear about too often. I would also like to write a book about my own paranormal experiences, things along the lines of ghosts. I've had a number of experiences. And then I've been promising the county next door, Ozaki County, I'm going to write a book about them, and I haven't done that yet either. So I'm not sure which of these projects is going to win out.
But there's plenty of stuff to write. You know, to me, I think the fun part of doing what you're doing, as far as writing the books go, is the research. I think the research, I mean, the writing is cool because that's, you're presenting that to your audience. in the way you tell the story, or how you define the situation or the scenario. But it's the digging. It's the digging into all this, and the more you dig, I mean, I've been doing the show for 4 years. We're in our 4th year, and I'm not a ufologist. I'm not a paranormal investigator. I'm kind of a researcher's researcher, if you will. And I find it just so interesting you learn so much from so many different people, and digging into this stuff, and some of these, especially with this, fringy type stuff, if you will, it can go so many levels deep, and you meet this person that saw this, or that guy saw this, or, and like with your website, you got a great website out there. I encourage people to go take a look at it, because there's a ton of info on it, stories and stuff that people have sent into you. It's just amazing what comes out of the woodwork when you're putting a book like that together.
The most rewarding thing, even beyond the research, is once the book comes out and people start coming up to you with their experiences. I had a devil of a time finding people who could tell me that they came out with that they had Goatman experiences. But now that the book is out there, people who didn't know about my research are seeing it, and so after the fact, they're telling me all these incredible things, like that Illinois story where the man was chased down the hill by what sounds like a Greek satyr. I mean, that's really rewarding to know that this research is helping people not feel isolated when they have these experiences. Like the lady who almost hit that weird animal over at Holy Hill in September, she now knows that there are people out there having similar experiences, even though her or me or really anyone can explain what she saw, she at least knows she's not alone. Because these types of experiences can be very unsettling. I told one radio host once that I hope I never actually see Goatman myself, because it's the kind of thing that could potentially unhinge your grasp on reality.
Right.
It just would be so disturbing.
Now, do you do a radio show as well?
I do. It's an internet radio show. We are on Z Talk Radio most every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Central.
Okay.
So I think that'd be 6 o'clock out in Salt Lake. We are live, and it's internet radio, so it's pretty much anything goes. All sorts of wild stuff happens. We've had Linda Godfrey and people like that on. The show had been on hiatus, but it is back. We had our first show in 3 months back last Tuesday. It will be back this Tuesday as well. So you just dial in ztalkradio.com, and the show starts playing in the background.
I think internet radio is. I think there's so much. I think with terrestrial radio, you get a lot of a lot of times people say, well, you don't get a lot of call-ins. I think a lot of people are afraid to call in, maybe to a regular radio station, like we're broadcasting on. I would love for people to call in with the stories. But I think with the internet type stations, people feel maybe a little bit protected. They're like, well, maybe there's not quite as many people listening. It's okay to talk about these things. But I have learned so much from those type of programs, and the work and the dedication that people put in is just amazing.
We don't get a lot of phone calls either. I think what really intimidates people is the idea of being on live radio. The podcasts that I've heard that have had the most success with call-ins are usually the ones that have the 24-hour answering machine set up, and so then people feel comfortable. They call, leave a recording, and it gets played. I think people are really afraid of embarrassing themselves on live radio. I know I am. I just go ahead and do it anyway.
Sounds good. Well, Nathan, I want to thank you for giving up your Saturday night for us and coming on, and I'd like to stay in touch with you and have you back on the program again. Interesting work. People need to check out your website again. It's jnathancouch.com. People can pick up all your books there. And again, just going through the posts, the blog posts are interesting. Interesting story, interesting stuff people are sending into you, and want to wish you and your family a very, very happy holiday coming up. And look forward to having you back on again.
Thanks. And there's one little tidbit I'd like to give your listeners is if you're a little afraid to commit about a book about Washington County, Wisconsin, or about Goatman, maybe you don't want to spend your hard-earned money, if you do have access to the Kindle Online Lending Library, or if you have an Amazon Prime account, you can read both books for free on your Kindle or laptop.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Can't beat that deal.
Nope, that's as good as it gets right there.
It does. All right, brother, take care. Hey, thanks again, my friend. I appreciate you being here tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Take care. Have a happy holiday.